Hey, what's up everybody? It's Gansu here with more Stormbound. Today I'm going to be talking about how to spend your resources like your fusion stones and your rubies. This is going to be a video mostly for people who don't spend that much money on the game, because obviously if you spend enough money, you can pretty much do anything that you want. This guide is going to be geared more towards how to choose one sort of strategy to play, and then within this strategy, how to decide what cards to upgrade more and stuff like that. So first off, you got to choose a kingdom, and the reason why is it's a lot easier to switch between strategies within a kingdom than to switch to a different kingdom. Just because if you upgraded everything within one class, then it's better to stick within that. So there's a couple of ways to decide what kind of kingdom you want to play, and I guess the first one would be whatever cards that you currently have the most of, because if you have more cards, then it's easier to upgrade them. Pretty straightforward. Secondly, you could be looking at a strategy that interests you or that you know is good, and this would be a good way to decide what to play if you want to win a lot, just because this way, when you invest your resources, you know you're investing in a good deck as opposed to just some random one that you came up with. And lastly, if you saw a deck that I used in one of my videos and you like it, give it a shot. I highly encourage you. Especially in my videos where I showcase a deck that I used to hit rank 1 with. That means I spent a lot of time with the deck. I'm very familiar. You can probably ask me for tips on how to use it, and it's a tried and true deck. So hopefully these three will help you be able to choose a kingdom fairly confidently. And if not, I'll give you a look at the current meta. It's been 2 weeks since the last update, and so I'm pretty confident with everything that I'm saying here. You'll notice the scope of this meta breakdown is very big. That's because I'm not trying to tell you what is the best deck to play in this video. I'm more just trying to give you a look at all the possible options that you could ever dream of playing. So just to look at it real quickly, in winter, they have a lot of control decks. Most people like to play some sort of freeze package with control. I myself go without the freeze combo, partly because I don't have frost hexers at level 5, so it's not that good. But also because it just lets me play more win conditions, which is a lot more fun. And then, of course, every kingdom right now can play some sort of neutral aggressive deck, just from using like 80% neutral cards and then a couple low mana class cards. Secondly, we have Swarm, which has a Swarm Rush deck that you know and love, using some combination of Herald's Hymn and Forgotten Souls. They also have some more Satyr-oriented decks now, and I say Satyr variants because I've seen control decks and aggressive decks using Satyrs. I've seen decks using the Satyr structure to buff other Satyrs now, which is pretty cool. And then there's, once again, neutral aggressive decks. Shadowfen, I see a lot of poison decks that try to use some sort of poison synergies, and once again, there's aggressive versions and there's more control-y versions. There's also the old Kindred's Grace deck, although it's significantly weaker now, so I see some people pulling out High Priestess Klaxi instead to try to get a better sort of buff going. And then with Ironclad, I'd say they have the most limited playstyles. Most decks try to use Dr. Mia to buff their structures, and I see Siege Assembly, which is the structure that shoots the first enemy in front of it. And there's also Emerald Towers, which is the neutral structure that buffs all units in front of it. So those are the structure decks. And then Push-Pull Control. This is not something that I've personally seen, but I've heard people talking about. So if I would tell you one deck to not play on this list, I would say Push-Pull Control. It doesn't. I'm still not actually sure it's a thing. I just put it on there. And then finally, most classes get a neutral aggressive deck, but Ironclad is more of a construct aggressive, simply because they have a lot of construct synergies in their low mana units. And there's also some constructs in the neutral cards. So overall, their aggressive decks are centered around playing constructs, as well as other low mana cards like Gifted Recruits and stuff. So that's basically the meta right now. If I had to give you a tier list, I would put Winter Pact at the top, and then Swarm of the East, and then between Shadowfen and Ironclad, it's kind of a toss-up. But I would definitely say that in my rank 1 games, Winter is by far the most dominant. And me, myself, I'm playing Winter. The hardest times that I ever have are other Winter decks. Swarm can sometimes rush me out, but I'd say my win ratio against them is pretty positive. simply because Winter Pact has a lot of great early game too. So do be warned though that if you're a free-to-play player, you might not want to play Winter Pact simply because it takes a lot of investment in order to get it to be a good deck. And we'll get into that a little more later on like what cards become a lot stronger when upgraded and stuff like that. So let's get to how you should be upgrading your cards. Here's a little nice food pyramid with the base as everything that you should be focusing on, and working out your way up to the top to things that are not so important and that should be saved for later. Note that this is not like saying that the cards down here are better than cards up here. It's more saying that for your deck, you need a stable foundation before you can work up to these things up here. So first and foremost, you have your low mana neutral cards. And this is because, first of all, neutrals can be used in every single kingdom. So it gives you a lot more value to upgrade these first. And secondly, all the low mana neutrals are very, very strong. And no matter what deck you're playing, you will always be using them. In addition to that, every single game will see low mana cards coming out, but not every single game will see high mana cards coming out. So you get so much value off of upgrading your low mana cards first because they will be played a lot more than high mana cards. So secondly, you got your low mana class cards. This is basically almost as important as your low mana neutrals. It's just that not all low mana class cards are good. And if you switch between kingdoms, then these cards won't come with you, but the neutrals will. So these two are pretty similar. Next, we get to the strongest neutral cards. And I would say upgrade strong neutral cards, which I'll go over which ones I think are the strongest later. These cards, essentially, other than your low mana cards, they're probably the second most efficient cards that you can get in general situations. Some of these are legendaries and epics, which is also, as I'll go on to talk about the books later, one of the reasons why you can't just stick with buying the common books. So next we got synergy class cards, and I labeled the category as so because almost every single class card that you see at higher manas will be synergistic to some sort of strategy, so that by themselves they're not actually that good, but when utilized with other cards together, they become a lot stronger. Cards that line this category are freeze synergy cards and poison synergy cards, where I would say if you want to use these strategies, what you need to do first is build this strong foundation so that you can actually get these cards out. Because if you upgrade these cards first, even if they're very good, you're not going to be getting them off reliably every game, and as a result, you're going to be losing your games a lot, even if you're using good cards. But if you upgrade your neutrals first, then even if your synergy cards aren't that strong, you can still get the combos off reliably and then hope to win the game. And then lastly, we got your niche cards, and these cards are basically like synergy cards, except even more, less frequently used. And for example, Siren of the Seas is very niche. And I'm not saying that Siren is bad. I actually use her in my rank 1 deck right now, and she's won me plenty of games. But it's just that if you want to upgrade some cards and not all, then save niche for last because these cards don't come out often enough to justify being used. So you guys will notice, essentially, what I'm saying here is cards that see a lot of play and cards that get better as they get upgraded should be your first priorities. And now I'll get into a little bit more specifics on the current state of the game and what cards are as such. So these are all the low mana neutrals. This is your very bottom part. And this ranking over here that I've given isn't saying which card is better than which other card. It's more saying which card is more important to upgrade. So you'll notice with the 1 mana neutrals, Lawless Herd gains the most value out of the 3 of these per upgrade. So I would say Lawless Herd is the most important to upgrade. These other 2 are also important. North Sea Dog is least important because half the time you're already playing it for 1 strength and upgrading it doesn't change that. And the other half of the time when you are playing it for its maximum strength, the 1 extra strength per level isn't helping you as much as the 1 extra strength per level on Lawless Herd. And then 2 mana neutrals, I would say Gifted Recruits is used way more than the other 2, so upgrade that first. First Mutineer, I personally use it in every single deck, but some people don't, so it's second. And then Summon Militia is even more niche, and also its efficiency ratio doesn't go up as quickly as the other 2, since it already starts off at a baseline of 2 mana for 4 strength. 3 mana neutrals, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but once again, it's kind of the same thing. Cards that get used more and cards that get better as they get upgraded come first, and then other cards come next. Let's look at top strongest neutrals. this is a very interesting part that I want to talk about. This is the third section here, strongest neutrals. You'll notice these cards don't actually have a ranking between them because it's very dependent on what deck you want to play. But these first three I want to specifically talk about. Ubis the Hunter, I absolutely love this card. If you've talked to me before, then you'll know that it's my favorite card in the game. I'm a huge supporter of it because it's so good. In general, any card that can match Gifted Recruits in efficiency and can also move. So if you look over here, actually no other card can match Gifted Recruits in this regard because Gifted Recruits at level 5 is 2 mana for 6 strength. So that's a 3-to-1 strength to mana efficiency. And no other card here can match that and also has movement. You'll see Lawless Herd actually has 5 times efficiency. Some Militia has a 4 times efficiency. North Sea Dog can have like a 9 times efficiency, but that's like kind of sketchy already. But none of these cards have any movement. So Gifted Recruits is very unique in this regard, and it costs 2 mana. So any card that can replicate this effect at a higher mana instantly becomes extremely good. So Ubis the Hunter, actually at level 5, which is very difficult to get to, it becomes 10 strength base with 1 movement, and he shoots a 2 damage fireball for every unique unit type on the board. So baseline, because he adds 1 unit type, he'll become 5 mana for 12, which is already very good, which at higher manas is already like an acceptable ratio. But the thing is, you will often have like 4 or 5 types on the board, and at that point he becomes even better than Gifted Recruits mana wise. So that's a very strong effect and why he's probably the strongest neutral in the game. Second comes Needle Blast, which you guys probably know and love this card, or know and hate it if you don't play it. But at level 5, it deals 4 damage to 4 different enemies. So that's 5 mana for 16 strength at best, which once again is better than Gifted Recruits, and also like essentially has movement since it's dealing damage on the spot. The lastly is Lich Summoner, which you guys might be unfamiliar with this card because it's very underrated. It's a card that when it kills a unit, it spawns a unit behind it. At level 5, it's 6 mana for 12 strength, and the unit that it spawns is 6 strength. So that means that if you play it and it has 1 movement, if you play it and it kills a unit, then it instantly becomes 6 mana for 18 total strength, which is insane. That matches Gifted Recruits exactly, except it happens to be at 6 mana, and it's very, very rare to find any 6 mana card that can give you that much value that consistently. This card is actually nuts, and I think if you get onto using it before other people do, it will give you a huge advantage. But rant aside, I think that all these cards in general, I would feel pretty good about upgrading them. Now let's get to the class cards. And so these cards that I'm looking at are going to be kind of low mana class and kind of synergy class. But essentially the point of this list over here is to say that if you're looking to upgrade a card in your deck and you already upgraded everything over here and something over here, then I would feel pretty good about upgrading any of these cards because they're all very important. So I'm not going to go too much into like talking about them. This is kind of what I think in the current meta are like pretty useful. So that's about it. Now let's talk about the best cards to upgrade when aside from this table. So what I'm going to be talking about here is strictly what cards get really good when you upgrade them, because some cards you'll look at them at level 1 and they'll be terrible. Like Needle Blast at level 1 deals 2 damage to 2 different enemies. So at best that's 5 mana for 4 damage, which is just atrocious. But somehow everybody is using it. And why is that? That's because compared to other cards, it gets a lot better as you upgrade them. So over here I've pretty much got a list of all the cards in the game that have certain levels where they get really good. Just to look at a couple of them, for example, Ubis the Hunter, at level 3, his ping deals 1 damage per unit type, and then at level 4 deals 2 damage per unit type. So you'll see, like, I'd say 4 unit types is on average what I see on the board after playing Ubis, and so that's a +4 in strength right there for 1 level. Or for example, if you look at, say, Reign of Frogs, at level 3 to level 4, the mana cost goes from 3 to 2, so that's like a 150% increase at such a high level, which is awesome. Or if you look at some cards that have like all levels, they either are really low mana, so every single improvement is really good, like Restless Goats, all levels, because he starts off at 1 strength. Every single level makes him a lot better. And the last kind is cards that have AoE, like Wisp Cloud, Blood Ministers in a way, or Toxic Sacrifice. These cards, for every single level that they go up, even if their AoE effect only increases by like 1, that is actually increasing by 4, increasing by 8, depending on like how useful the card is. These cards overall get a lot better than, for example, if we look at some cards like pretty much all these 3 mana cards, 3 mana neutrals, they don't get much better when you upgrade them. Like they go up by 1 strength per level pretty much consistently for all 6 of these cards. So even though they're in this lower chunk here, the low mana neutrals, I wouldn't prioritize upgrading them as much. I wouldn't prioritize upgrading them as much as Gift of the Wise, even though Gift of the Wise is a synergy card, or Wisp Cloud, even though Wisp Cloud is a synergy card. All right, getting on to quests and books. This is a pretty easy part. A lot of you guys probably through playing have already figured out a good strategy, but there are a couple of misconceptions that I want to clarify, so it's worth taking a look into it. As you guys probably know, you want to re-roll quests that give you 50 gold. Sometimes you'll be forced to complete an 80 gold quest because all 3 of your quests have been re-rolled and you only have these 2. So complete these if you have to. But what you really want to complete are the 120 gold quests and the 5 ruby quests. And the misconception here is some people think, oh, if I convert rubies to gold at the best ratio possible, the 5 ruby quest is actually worse than 80 gold. It actually converts to about 60 something gold. So why should I do this quest? I should just re-roll this one too. But that's actually incorrect because, as you'll see later on, rubies are kind of unique and you shouldn't be converting them to gold in the first place. There's a reason why 120 gold quests and 5 ruby quests are the hardest quests to complete. Is because both of these are the best quests. Alright, let's get to the books that you buy. You can buy glorious books for 25 rubies, you can buy heroic books for 50 rubies, and you can buy mythic books for 80 rubies. You can buy splendid books for 100 gold, which actually converts to about 8 rubies. Essentially, if you just look at rubies per card, splendid books give you the best ratio, which is why some people say convert all of your rubies to gold and then buy the splendid book, which is actually a bad strategy, and I'll talk about that in a moment. If you look at glorious book, they give you half commons, half rares usually, and then if you look at heroic book, they give you about half epic, half rares and half epics. And if you look at mythic books, they usually give you 3 epics and 1 legendary, although if you get lucky, you can actually get a better ratio than that. So going back to this food pyramid, most of you guys already know you want to do your low mana neutrals first. And so that strategy converts to spend all your rubies on gold to buy splendid books. But this is actually wrong, because although a lot of the core cards that you need are the commons, the actual good cards at low mana can also be rares, epics, and legendaries. Like if you just look at over here, 2 out of 3 of the 1 mana neutrals are rares, not commons. And then if you look at cards in your core, like Destructobots, that's a rare. Forgotten Souls, that's a rare. Gift of the Wise, that's an epic. Reign of Frogs, that's an epic. Dr. Mia, that's a legendary. Linked Golems, that's an epic. So if you're only buying the Splendid book, granted, if you buy like an infinite amount of these, you will actually start getting epics and legendaries, but they're super, super rare. Glorious book already gives you a lot more rares than Splendid book. I would say Splendid book, you probably get 1 to 4 rare to common. Glorious book, you probably get almost 1 to 1 rare to common. It's kind of anecdotal, but I'm almost certain that the ratio in Glorious book is at the bare minimum better. It wouldn't make sense for the developers to make the gold book as good as the Glorious book, simply from a financial perspective. It would be better to incentivize players to get rubies if this book were better. That being said, Splendid book, buy it with your gold, but just stop converting your rubies into gold to buy the Splendid book. I was actually a supporter of upgrading all of your commons first, way back in the day. But the reason why is because back in the day, you could upgrade a common with 1 fusion stone per card. And nowadays, it's 3 fusion stones per card. So it becomes a lot more balanced between should you upgrade your commons, your rares, or your epics, and so on. But that's not even related to actually obtaining the commons and the rares and the epics. The cards that you should be trying to get as opposed to upgrade should be rares, epics, and legendaries. So especially as a free-to-play player, if you get enough rubies, what you should be buying is one of the bottom 2 books. You can get as many commons as you need from farming, but you can't farm for legendaries and epics as reliably. This will be the only way for you to actually farm them, is by doing this ruby quest and then buying one of the bottom 2 books. So mythic books, if you look, it's 20 rubies per card. It's super expensive. It does not feel good to buy a mythic book and then get bad cards. But if that scares you, go for the heroic book. because not too many legendaries are that useful anyways. But at some point, if you want to move to higher level play, you will have to get Ubis the Hunter. At rank 1 level play, Ubis the Hunter is in every single deck. You simply cannot live without him because he is so good. He benefits against every other strategy in the game, and he benefits against fighting Ubis. Like, you simply have to obtain him at some point. And the only way to get him reliably is through the Mythic Book. Heroic Book, Mythic Book, they are your friends. They are not to be ignored, and you just need them. All right, so last thing I want to talk about is to give you guys some sample deck shells. And what I mean by a shell is it's a collection of neutral cards that essentially, if you want to play a certain strategy, if you use the shell that I gave you over here for that strategy, you can pretty much throw in any cards from that like strategy, obviously, that go along with it to create a pretty solid deck. So here's an aggro shell. This deck basically uses all of the 1 mana cards, all of the 2 mana cards, and then a West Wind Sailors for the movement, and then an Ubis because he's good. And then from here, for example, if you were Swarm, you would throw in like all of the Swarm core. And then if you were in other classes, you would throw in like part of their core, like all the low mana cards. And then you would pretty much have a very solid aggro deck. And then the next shell here is the Attrition shell. And Attrition basically focuses more on pinging the opponent down. They don't care so much about getting a board presence. You'll notice they run Needle Blast and Ubis for this explicit purpose. And then they run cards that aren't very good for building a board advantage, like some Militia and Temple Guardians. They have no movement, and they're very easily countered by like freezing you and stuff like that. But the thing is, you don't really care because all you really care about is like pinging the opponent down with Needle Blast, Ubis the Hunter, First Mutineer. If I were to finish out this deck, I would probably add some more direct damage. For example, I would add some extra movement cards, maybe like a Devastators from Swarm, or I would add Siege Assembly from Ironclad, just to ping the opponent down more reliably. Lastly, we have the Control shell. This is actually the shell that I'm using right now to play, although I also have Siren of the Seas up here, but that's not really like core in any control deck. You'll see a lot less early game. We're playing 1 of the 1 mana neutrals and 2 of the 2 mana neutrals. We're playing Freebooters, which is a very good late game card. And then once again, we have Ubis the Hunter and Lich Summoners, who is just really good at giving you a board advantage. We're not playing Needle Blast because Needle Blast can be unreliable in defending. And so as a control deck, when you're in that like 5 mana, 6 mana zone, you're not really playing Needle Blast. And as a late game card, you have better options. So this pretty much closes out my guide. Just to reiterate the general strategy, you want to choose a kingdom that you want to play. You want to choose a kingdom, choose a strategy, know what cards are in your deck, and then you want to know what are the best cards to upgrade. You need to fix your base first. You need to upgrade your low mana cards, and then from there you can see what happens based on your discretion and which cards get the strongest after 1 level. When you do your quests, do the good ones obviously, and spend your rubies wisely. There's no, I can't give you like a good ratio between buying these 3. That's just based off of so many factors. But don't spend your rubies on Splendid Books because you need these other 3. And if you're free to play, then you're lacking a lot on epics and legendaries. So these 2 are your friend. And so that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out.